Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Circle of the World podcast, where we discuss Joe Abercrombie's First Law series. I am one of your hosts, Lord Chamberlain Jeffrey, and here are my co-hosts.
Archlector George.
And Harrison, the Adeptus Historical.
As you all know, we are covering The Blade itself, the first book in the original trilogy. We'll be covering Nobody's Dog, and Each Man Worships Himself on this episode. So let's get started. Again, just want to thank everybody for your support. Just remember to shoot on over to the social medias, find us there, and our YouTube page where we're trying to constantly upload new content there. You want to, George? You want to say anything else about the social media stuff?
Yeah, just make sure you follow us. We're on like Reddit or on Instagram. We put loads of the AI art stuff. So if you saw our post on Reddit and it got removed, but if you want to see some more AI art that's related to the First Law, then just head over to our Instagram.
Thank you for that. So we'll move on to our first segment, which will be the best meme of the week. You want to take it away here?
Yeah, we got user Red Hat needs a spin-off, which he absolutely does. And it's the that meme where the guy passes the note and he looks angry, and the note says sharp ends is good. And I can't tell if this guy means that sharp ends is good or if it isn't. What do you guys think?
I think it means it is good, and he's just telling all the critics that don't like it that it's good.
Okay.
That's what I think.
I bloody hope so, because I've never seen anyone criticize that book. I think it's fantastic.
And for those who don't know, people who do just follow along and stuff, Sharp Ends is Joe's book. It's a series of short stories that's placed in between Red Country and the Age of Madness trilogy. And it's shorter. It's not as long as the others. So maybe some people don't like it because it's shorter, and it's less so about one story. It's got a whole bunch of short stories, but it's pretty fucking good. So
Yeah, exactly. So Red Hat needs a spin-off. That's a good conversation to have. We're gonna have to have a chat about that.
Uh-oh, Archlector's upset.
You don't need those fingers.
Can't post shit memes with no fingers.
What am I trying to say? A fitting punishment.
Yeah. A suitable one.
A suitable punishment.
There you go. All right. So thank you for that, George. And now we'll move on to our first chapter read through, which is Nobody's Dog. We start this chapter from the point of view of our boy Major West, and our man is stressed. West is stressed, and he's running around trying to make sure that preparations for the war in the north are where they need to be. And now he's on his way to a meeting with Marshal Burr, and he's heading to the south gate of the Agriant when he encounters a little bit of a mess here. He comes across two guardsmen who are messed up. One has a bloody nose, and the other one must have gotten his nuts cracked. And the two others have their spears lowered towards an old man and a dark youth. Wait, it's Yulway and Pharaoh. West thought Pharaoh was a boy by the state of her dress, but he does note that the thing that surprises him the most, not her scar or anything, is her yellow eyes. That
yellow like piss.
I love that. I love that too, because like, how many times are you thinking about something and then you smell or see something else and you immediately associate that color or that sound with that thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the smell of piss, washes over West because that's due to Pharaoh not really taking a shower in a very long time.
Or maybe even ever.
Maybe ever, yeah.
Maybe ever.
Yeah, in the desert, really. Rub yourself with sand.
Yeah. Don't like
Dry
chinchillas.
shower.
Don't chinchillas do that?
I don't know.
I think they do. They rub themselves in sand and stuff.
I didn't brush up on my chinchilla law before we started this video.
I don't even have a bathtub. I have a bathtub, but I don't use a shower. I just have a bathtub full of sand.
Oh, interesting. How's your skin looking?
Sometimes when it starts getting into certain places, it feels really uncomfortable. But for the most part, I think the coarse, rough sand is great for my skin.
Oh, God.
I'm partial to charcoal myself.
You just go all out.
Oh, shit.
I'm British, so we just have a bog.
Yeah, you go into
Just
the
like a
local
swamp.
swamp.
Yeah, you just go to a marsh and you just like take a little dip in there.
Yeah.
You're like Frodo. Lord, was it Two Towers when he just
Get into face plants. Don't follow the lights.
Yeah.
what does he do? He jumps right in there with him.
Oh shit.
Oh shit.
Anyways,
Yeah.
so
So
he
West,
sees Pharaoh.
yeah, and West asked the sergeant what the hell's going on, and they find out that they were trying to enter the Agrion, and the guy he's like, Yulwei hands them a letter of transit that's signed by Lord Hoff, which means that they should be admitted, but not armed, and that was the issue, because they were willing to let them in, but not with the weapons that Pharaoh has, and apparently they were able to get Pharaoh's bow and her sword from her not without difficulty. But when the sergeant actually tried to search her for other weapons, that's when all hell broke loose. So Pharaoh still has a knife and is waving it around, ready to use it, looking menacing. And Yulwei he's trying to calm her down, but he's also he's had it.
Kinda done.
He's just like, fuck this bitch. And now West does try to see it from her perspective and tries to emphasize, but he also decides to talk to Yulwei first since he seems more reasonable.
I think it's quite interesting in that sentence as well, where he's like, "Oh, I'm trying to look at it from her perspective," but then he immediately thinks, "Oh, maybe they all just smell like piss. Maybe that's just how they smell." And it's like
Well-
he's just been accidentally racist, though.
Yeah, well, how many times have we done that though? You know what I mean? Like, and like in real life, not the racism part, but
Not that. I was
whenever
waiting
you see
for Harrison
somebody,
to
you
fix
see
that.
somebody, and you're like, man, that's weird. But then you're, you know what? I'm not gonna be judgmental. Maybe it's this or that. Maybe all homeless people are dirty. Like you just put those assumptions into your mind because we have to fill in the blanks. And you're trying not to be judgmental, so you're like, surely they're all like that, but that actually ends up making it worse.
Yeah.
Yeah. What else? And Yulwei then introduces himself and Pharaoh, and Yulwei and West get to talking a bit about like where they're from. Apparently, Pharaoh's some place called Muntaz. And Yulwei's just like, I'm from a place that you won't even know on the maps, buddy.
Which is
It's
interesting.
too underground for you.
Yeah, it again shows that it may be very little, but there is more than the circle of the world.
Yeah, for sure. And West tells him that he fought against the Gurkish, in the previous war and all this jazz. So then,
You always get so excited. He's like, "Look, Pharaoh, this guy
Yeah.
fought against the Gurgish too. See, you
right,
can listen
yeah,
to him."
he tells Pharaoh that West fought against the Gurkish too, but that doesn't appease her. So he's like, "Fuck." So,
One of my favorite lines in the whole book.
Which one?
Is when Yulwei's like,
Say it.
"God's teeth, Pharaoh, I'm old. Please give him the knife before I die."
I was gonna say it was one of my favorite lines.
yeah, that's a great one because that's when West walks up to Pharaoh, right, and he asks for the knife in Kantic in a very calm manner, and she's taking her sweet time with it, and that's when Yulwei's like, "What the fuck?" and and then she finally hands the knife over after that. Then Major West warns the sergeant that, if any harm comes to them, then it is his ass. And then that's it. And then there's a bit of a time jump. We see him when he's now at the forges. He's talking to Major Valamir, who's in charge.
The armories are closed for the day.
Yeah, this guy. He's the master of the king's armory, right? And this guy is giving West a hard time, right? He's not wanting to light the forges again. He's just not listening, and West is trying all the different tactics that he's learned and being promoted to Marshal Burr's staff and how to get things done. But this guy is trying West's patience. So to the point where West basically insulted his honor, right? When he was like, "What happens when we're all fucked with no equipment and you're over here with your cold forges, you bitch?" And then the guy responds, "How dare you? How dare you insult my personal honor?" and then he starts talking shit about how you got no blood, and once Burr is gone, then what do you think is gonna become of you? Blah blah blah. You have no blood, no family, except that sister of yours, and I hear. And then that's when Wes is like, "What? What'd you say?"
Yeah.
What? Yeah, I Colonel Valamir, or not Colonel, not yet. Major Valamir.
Mhm.
Is it not the first time we see? Not the last time we see him. And I really like this introduction to his character. because yeah, I don't want to get into it too much, but his character's journey is something that's kind of in the background, but it
Mhm.
is there. And to see how he is here and to see the similarities and the differences much later on, it's just super interesting. And so,
Mhm.
as
Yeah.
respect to the writing further down the line, his introduction here is very almost bland, but it fits so well. He's like the only character that has a name that's a pompous ass. But it's there's a bit more that comes up later on. Nothing crazy, but it's
Mhm.
nice.
No, that's
Yeah,
true.
I think Joe's really good at that. He's good at introducing these characters that seem like nothing, but they have their own kind of place in the world,
Mhm.
and they're not just an obstacle for West in this case.
Right. Yeah.
Basically, as soon as Joe gives them a name, they have motivation and they have character. We just haven't seen it yet.
Mhm. That's true. So West basically almost loses his shit. Right. It's enough to scare Major Valimir to the point where he's like, he agrees to have the Fortress relay. He's like, yeah, sure. He's like, and West is like, I think I made another enemy, but fuck it. Uh, then there's another time jump, and Major West, he arrives at his house, and he sees Artie, and she's already drinking, much to the dismay of West.
Well, it's
It's
like
like,
before he goes in, right? Like he's already had a rough day, and
mm-hmm,
I mean, I don't know about you guys, but like, yeah, sometimes you have a rough day and you hear something going on inside your house, and it may be a little irritating. But even then, it's not like irritating in the sense of oh, I'm about to blow up. Here I go. I'm about to blow up. Normally, with normal people, it's like, okay, I'm a little irritated, but okay, this is home. It's gonna be all right. It's my family. Let's not blow up on them. That's not the right thing. That they didn't have anything to do with my shitty day.
mm-hmm.
Wes, he doesn't work that way. He's like, bitch, what are you doing in here?
Yeah,
Terrible.
and it is a bit weird how obsessed he is with RD, like not going out with Luthor.
Mm-hmm.
Like he knows that it won't end well, and there's basically a mismatch.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just like it is a bit creepy.
Yeah, well, I would say also.
I,
I mean, I have siblings. I have a lot of siblings, and
yeah,
I know that when it comes to people seeing each other, you kind of get protective of, especially your sisters.
for sure.
Mm.
However, the weird thing about this is the fact that I like how Joe highlights the lack of perspective on West Park because you get so used to putting your siblings, especially your younger siblings, into a box and saying that's where you belong. And instead of adapting as you get older, some older siblings just don't know how to adapt to that, and they won't know how to treat you anywhere, anything else than like a child. So Wes comes in here and he's trying to be a parent to her, which is
Mm.
unfortunately, he mimics his father very closely here.
Yeah,
As we're about to find out.
as we're about to, yeah, exactly. I mean, he noticed like they're talking a little bit, just going about, I guess, their normal day, their normal interactions, and then he notices that Artie's acting weird. She keeps glancing at and then moving towards a nearby desk. But then he gets there first and he sees a note. It's another one of the notes that she has been sending Giselle. Dun dun dun. Then they start arguing. Uh, man, this argument gets pretty bad. Basically, the crux of it is West is so worried about society, like the society's
The way he
perceptions,
looks.
Mm.
the way he looks, and like, sure, he's worried about how they'll view her, but it's really mostly about him. He's being very like self-centered here, and Artie is upset because Giselle's the only fucking. He may be an idiot, but he's the only one that's giving her attention.
Yeah,
Uh, and when she calls West out on this like
being selfish.
selfishness, West, um,
That's you
what's
fucking
what's a,
bitch. And then
what's a nice yeah, what's a nice way to say this? He goes ballistic, and
there is no
Yeah.
nice way
there's
to say it.
no nice way. Yeah, the guy just
And I think
chokes her, beats her, all that jazz.
I think this is the first time when I first read this book. When I got to this point, I was like, "Oh, this isn't like every other book I've read.
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
is something else."
Yeah, I thought West was one of the good guys.
Yeah,
Wow.
exactly.
Yeah. I felt exactly the same way. I read this is like the violence and all that, the way people talk. I liked it. I liked how it was different, but it still kind of felt like a fantasy, thing. Oh, not too serious. You talk about my family was killed, but that's It's terrible, but it's so tropish,
Hmm.
And so we get to this part, and we're like, oh, this is dealing with real shit. Okay,
Yeah.
that's what
Mhm.
I realized here, and I liked it. Not the violence, but I like that he included it because it is an aspect of people's lives, unfortunately.
It
Hmm.
is. It's a very honest portrayal of people, like some people, you know. Uh,
And I don't know about you guys, but when I was reading this, I actually felt the way that Wes was feeling, like that, that awful guilt.
mm-hmm.
And I just think the way that this is put on paper is just so good. It's fantastic.
No, it is. It is. It's done really well, and he's horrified at what he did. When he calms down, but
She has a
what?
great point after
Mm,
she's he's like, I feel terrible. Oh, I'm so sorry, Artie. And she's like, that's what he did too. And it's great too because it's the first time you even realize, oh, he did, like, their father. She doesn't even say our father until after a little bit. She's
mm-hmm.
just like, that's what he said too. That's always what he did. Is that he would hold us and cry and say how sorry he was, and then he'd do it again. And Artie is sitting there whenever he is choking her out, punching her and shit. She's
Mm-hmm.
just looking at him like a fucking boss who's like
Mm.
not gonna back down to a bully, and she doesn't give him any kind of credit or any kind of uh,
She doesn't absolve him.
yeah. She doesn't absolve him. She does not give him any sympathy. She does not even like give him the satisfaction of a reaction, and it,
Yeah.
it is pretty epic on her
And then
behalf.
just sprays blood all over him and walks out like, fuck you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And he's left to his own devices to just think about what the fuck he did.
Hmm.
So we finally truly see the legendary, infamous temper of West.
Yeah, shame it wasn't Major Valamir, eh?
Right? It should have been. It should have been
Well, he
directed at
did.
Valamir.
He did.
No, no. Yeah, I
No,
mean,
I
but
mean,
But he
like
this
properly.
yeah, yeah.
let's think about this though. Let's think about this. West would not have ever punched Valamir because he knows that it's more detrimental to him to punch him. He's not a certain other character who places blame on other people. He knows what he's doing when he's doing it. He just loses control. And
Mm,
I think, as fucked up as it is, he hit Artie because he could finally hit somebody and let it out on somebody who
Mm,
wasn't going to fight back because she's a woman, because she was his sister.
mm-hmm.
Which is
exactly.
why I understand. I like West's character, but this act alone, even though there's some development about it later down the line, this act alone is absolutely disgusting for him. It
Mm-hmm.
makes his character absolutely foul for
Mm-hmm.
me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. And that's pretty much the end of the chapter. I mean, he's just standing there while Artie leaves his ass to go, I don't know, go out,
Get drunk.
get drunk.
And with in on the Artie note, well, we'll talk about her in a minute, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Well, then what do you guys rate this chapter as?
I think I'd give this one an 8 out of 9. It'd be
Mm.
easy to call it shock value, but it's not really. Like, it does shock you, but it's not there just to shock you. It's there to illustrate these characters so well.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, 8 out of 9, I think.
Harrison?
Yeah, I would say the first time I read it, I was like, oh, come on, this is gonna happen to the only good guy has to be Grimdark. But sat there and thought about it. I was like, you know what? They did mention things before. They set it up, not for him to beat her, but it was set up to show their relationship, especially when you reread it again. Which is why I pointed it out, and how Wes treats his sister outside of this moment. He doesn't treat her with respect. He doesn't treat her in a loving way. He's very condescending. He's very demeaning of her, and anytime they mention back home with her father, it's always this kind of awkward, like kind of this darker feeling. And so whenever this happens and you realize those things all line up, I think it's executed in a very meaningful way, like what George said, very good for the character's development. And so I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 9 as well, because I think it's really good for.
Wow. Wow,
Are
you
you,
guys.
Jeff?
Yeah, I was just gonna give it a 7 out of 9. Now I feel like an idiot, but all right.
Give us 7 out of 9, baby. Stand
It's-
by your
I am.
Stick to your guns, man.
stand by
I
your
am.
fingers.
I am. I'm just like, oh, whoopsie. Stand by my fingers. Yeah, I thought it was written really well. I like the fact that we get to see the culmination of all these little hints about West's temper, and it shows up, and it shows up in a place that we didn't expect it to happen as a first time reader. You expect a good guy to blow off his, to blow up and lose his temper at a bad person, at a villain, or an
Right.
annoyance of a character. And here it's his own sister. Thought that was some nice juxtaposition. I do feel terrible for Artie. um,
Yeah.
and I just thought it was worthy of a 7. I didn't think anything else of it.
And that's fair. There's nothing wrong with that because also, other than that key moment there, there's not a lot else that happens. So I get
N-
it.
no, I do like that we get like cross, uh, not perspectives, but we have characters flitting in and out of each other's like point of view. Like Yulway and Pharaoh just.
Yeah,
This
it's
might
like
be the only
first
time, the first and only time I think they meet. I might be wrong, but I think
Yeah,
it
I
is.
think you're right. Yeah,
So I enjoy that stuff.
yeah. It's
Um,
like the first of the intertwining of the narratives.
Yeah.
Like
exactly.
it all starts to come together.
Yeah, which is why the plot really does pick up at the end of the book, and the majority of this book is really just like character development. Like, it's not really like the plot doesn't move forward too much,
Mm.
and it's an understandable critique, but
It's one of those
it,
things, isn't it? Like if they didn't have all of that character development, then this
Mhm.
moment wouldn't feel earned,
yeah,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
so
and
it just wouldn't be the same.
which leads us, as long as you guys have said everything you want to say about it,
Hmm.
Yeah.
into our character spot,
And
which I am proud to say is finally Artie West. Um,
dun, dun,
for
dun.
the soul. I mean, this is, I don't want to say it's the peak of her character, but this is where we really get to look at why she is the way she is and kind of actions she takes.
Mhm.
And despite obviously being beaten by her father whenever he wanted, and having growing up in that environment for all the way up into her early 20s until her father died, which she talks about. She basically spits on his grave and is like the happiest she's ever been. And it's absolutely, in my mind, it's so heartbreaking that she is admits to him how happy she was that she got his letter to come stay with him in the Agrion, um, because she thought he was going to protect her. He was going to be big brother, and she
And be there
goes
for her.
there. He gets neglected. She gets neglected just like um, she was at home, and
Mhm.
then she gets beat just like she was at home, and that is heartbreaking. But at the same time, though, it's like we said, epic because she is absolutely defiant and is, even though it's sad, she is like resolute in standing up for herself and she's not going to back down. That's the strong woman right there, and it's she is one of the best characters of that POV I think in the entire series.
So we move on to our second chapter read through, which is Each Man Worships Himself. This chapter is from Pharaoh's point of view. We start off where it's her and Yulway. They're in the room with Malachus Kwai, Logan, and Baez. And she's appraising the three of them. She looks at Logan. He's like, he looks stupid, but the way he's sitting, the way he's watching, he ain't stupid. He's dangerous. I'm going to keep an eye on this fucker. And then her appraisal of Kwai is pretty much like, this guy's a little bitch, but I'm keeping on him anyway. And then she looks at Baez and she trusts him the least of all because the way he looks at her, apparently, from in her mind, was appraising what her worth is, like a slaver would. A very cold, hard look. And it's like, damn, Pharaoh, chill out.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Bias is a nice guy. What are you talking about? Jesus.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And
I like
so,
that we have this from Pharaoh as well, because this is the first time we've seen her going through this kind of situation.
mhm.
Like every other chapter, she's been, fighting with Yulway, trying to kill Yulway, running away from Yulway. So to see her like going through this, where she's just standing there and appraising these things, I think that's good because we get to see her like in a monologue a bit more.
yeah, and then she's like walking around lollygagging like da 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 while
Yeah.
Yulway and Baez talk about what's going on in Gurkle. Um, they keep mentioning about some plan that needs to be, moved along now, since apparently the Gurkish have built an enormous fleet, and this is, obviously they were not power at sea before. They were primarily a land power. So, you know, Pharaoh doesn't give a shit about any of this.
I
He's
always
just-
love that we get the exposition bits
Mhm,
from Yulwei and Baez from Pharaoh's perspective,
mhm.
Hmm.
because it's always like she's always like, I don't care about that shit. I want vengeance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even though everyone else in the audience is like, oh, what's going on here?
Yeah. She's like, it's like there's a little bit of exposition, like, well, what are we gonna do now? And then all you hear is, "Fuck these guys! I want vengeance! Fuck this!" Oh, was that a garden? Is that a garden? Fuck gardens!
Yeah.
Forgot about that part.
Like the exposition is very like in and out, in and out. And then she turns around to look at after she curses out some gardens in her mind, and they're all staring at her, and she's like, "What's going on?" And then Bias is like, "Yo, are you sure that she's what I'm looking for?" And she goes, "I'm right here. I can hear you."
Yeah.
And he's still like, she looks like the part or whatnot, what have you. And then they talk about how fast she healed after fighting with some eaters, which is not normal. But Baez needs to be sure. So Baez pulls out 2 stones, puts them on the table, and asks Pharaoh to identify which one is red or which one is blue.
Blue.
Which one's blue, right?
Yeah.
And she chooses one, and he's like, "Great answer. That's what I'm been looking for." And she's like, "Yeah, I'm good
like-
like that." And then she looks at Logan, and Logan's looking at the stones with a very confused face. And she's like, "Huh?" And then Bias is like, "Ha, well, both these stones is red. You colorblind, ain't you, bitch?"
She just fucking decks him.
I just love this line too, and she's like, the old pink had played a trick on her.
Yeah.
You know, you just pull out 2 rocks and put them down on a table.
It's like she started to laugh, right? But no one plays a trick on Pharaoh Malgin. And so, yeah, she just cracks Baez in the nose, just straight up, bow. And then Yulwei's trying to pull her away, pulls her leg, and then tries to pull her arm. And then he catches an elbow to the face for his troubles. Like, this lady is out here decking Maguses left and right. Jesus Christ.
Bam, bam.
Gods be good. And then Logan gets up, and she's like, "Oh, we're gonna see how good this guy fights." And he starts to walk towards her, but then Baez, he stops him. He gets up. He's like, "I'm so sorry." It's like he can't breathe through his nose now at this point. And he's like, "I'm sorry." And he apparently, he's like, "It was a mean trick, but I needed to be sure. Will you forgive me?" And she's like, "Oh, his face changed. Like it looks like he meant it. Like he's a friendly old man." And
Which I
She-
love that
Mhm.
line.
Which one?
The
How his sort of like expression changes
how
so
it shows,
easily.
I mean, right here, it's very clear that Baez is very, very adept at making himself be perceived in the way that a certain people want him to be perceived.
Mm,
He knows how people see him, and he knows how to change that view. And I
okay.
absolutely love that little detail. Even the first read too, I was like, oh, that adds a whole new layer to Baez.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Each time you see him act differently, you know he's putting a show on, and I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah.
It's just a master manipulator.
Oh, and that's
Brilliant.
I mean, that's not even a spoiler. I mean,
Yeah,
if anybody's paying attention.
Oh,
to
and
this
you can
part,
see
you
that,
realize
can't you, just from this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
from this one line in it. In this kind of a minor chapter with Pharaoh, her observing everybody, we learn a whole new aspect of Baez, and it's awesome.
Hmm.
That's true. So he asked her if she will forgive him, and then she'll allow him and you away to discuss some things in private. So she goes into another room with Logan and Quai, and who else is there? The navigator, Brother Longfoot.
This line is so fun.
Stop your mouth, cunt!
You know what's so good about it too is that he sees her, goes to shake her hand and introduces himself, right? And he's blathering. She has yellow eyes and a big scar going through her face. Doesn't even take that into account. Just
He does
wants-
not give a fuck.
he just wants to talk to her. And she kind of like lets him talk for a little bit because she doesn't care enough, but she's like trying to listen to the conversation that Yue and Baez are having. And then when she says that, she says, "Stop your mouth, cunt." He's probably like, let me see. He's like, "And yet your skin is okay." And then he just like backs away slowly.
Yeah, he's done. Like that's
Yeah.
it. He's like, oh, okay.
That was good.
I
Um,
love how he just continues to be just completely oblivious.
Uh-huh.
I love that line where he's like, "Ah, you'd like me to guess then?" Indeed, it is a riddle. It's just like, what the fuck, man? Read the room.
Yeah.
It's so good too because like it just shows like this is like the first instance. You know, we had Baez and Logan singing a little annoyed by him, and we see him kind of being a kind of an idiot, but no, he knows what he's about.
hmm
And then we get to this scene, and you can tell he just doesn't give a fuck what anybody else is doing. He just wants to share his own stories. Period. Doesn't
That's
matter.
true. Yeah,
It's all about him.
that's true. And so now that he shut up, Pharaoh's able to hear what they're saying through the door. Niue seems like he's admonishing Baez at first. He goes like, "Khalil breaks the second law, so you got to break the first. Juvens would never have allowed this, you know." And Baez is like, "The first law is a paradox. All magic comes from the other side, even ours. So yeah." And then Yue mentions like that the cost of this thing might be too great. The seed, and it's like, "Ooh, we have the seed has entered the discussion yet again." Seems like Baez has a plan for this seed.
Which I believe the only other
Hmm.
time that we've heard the seed is from Galacta's dreams.
That and when he was reading that paper that he stole from the Adeptus Historical.
Right.
And
So it's like now we see a connectivity there. Is that the seed is something more. It's not just a store in the story.
Hmm.
And then Baez asks him, "How many eaters does Khalul have?" And Yowe's like, "Let's say 200, maybe more," which is a lot. And then they start naming certain eaters that come even from the old time that were Khalul's apprentices back in the day.
Well, only
He,
Mamoon was his first apprentice. Like
well, his first apprentice, but I imagine then like the East Wind and the Bloody Twins, those cursed Bloody Twins. Yeah.
Damn those
Those
bitches.
I know,
Damn
I love
them.
that. It's the only time you see Yowei be like, "Fuck those bitches." Every other time he's
Yeah.
always like stoic
Yeah.
and talking in riddles and shit, and now he's like, "Fuck those bitches."
Mhm.
Yeah. I think it's the only time he's ever sworn as well.
Yeah, it
Maybe
is.
he does not like them bitches apparently.
Yeah.
But apparently they were this is like those that were Khalul's apprentices in the old time. The one they called the East Wind and those cursed bloody twins. So I guess Mamoon was his first apprentice, and then he also had a couple after Mamoon, but as like at the same time maybe or something.
Right.
Um, and then Yue offers. Maybe I just speak to the motherfucker. Maybe he'll hear reason. And Baez is like, "Boy, you wild. That's not happening."
I love your modern translation. Perhaps Kalu will see reason, and then Jeff is like, "Man, come on, bruh. Be me pal, bruh."
You tripping, Yue? Get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, and they mentioned Mamoon here as well, and talking
Yeah.
about how he's like his first apprentice and all that. And I
Mhm.
like how Yulwa here says, "Well, you know, it's not Mamoon's fault. Basically, Mamoon is just a part of the group. He's not the reason why we hate him." He's like that. Your guys' feud was here long before then.
Yeah, before he was even born.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
which again
And then
shows the Magi's age.
yeah, and Yue is telling him that he's messing with stuff that Bias is messing with things that he can't control, and he admonishes him for using the art because he sees a shadow on him. Which so is art different than magic in the sense because like Yue does magic, but he doesn't like have a shadow on him.
He said too much. You've been using the art too much.
Mm.
Well, he says
Because-
you have been using the art. I know it. I see a shadow on you.
Yeah,
I think that's the
it's
thing. Like he's using so much. I think we sort of talked about this in one of the first few episodes as well,
Mhm.
where Baez basically doesn't control how much he lets through because we know now that all magic comes from the other side.
Right.
So him blowing stuff up is like a lot more powerful, and he uses a lot more energy than your way does to do his magic
Well, it's
Gotcha.
kind of,
or
and
his
it's
art.
kind of like the he sometimes Bias does use magic that's not high energy, I guess. Whenever he is, when he did the Colder, he did as you say, Jeff, the force choke. That was not high energy for him. That did not wear him down. That just like whenever Yulwei does stuff, it doesn't wear him down. Those minor things of magic are not a big deal. Whenever you fucking blow a whole forest up, that's really difficult. And maybe it wasn't difficult back in the old time, but it sure as hell is now. And so it requires them to really pull and use as much knowledge as they can to pull from the other side. And I think that's what Yulwei is saying here. It's basically like you've been using a lot more recently, and I can definitely see it because you're worn the fuck out. And Bai's like, I do what I have to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. The ends justify the means your way.
That's what Bias is going for.
Mm.
So, he basically gets Yulwei to come around to his plan. He mentions that, does this nine-fingered Northman can speak to spirits? He's like, yep. And he's like, and you mean for Pharaoh to hold the seed because she has the blood. It's like, ooh, what are they talking about? She's going to hold the seed? Dun, dun, dun. And so they come through the door. After Baez asks Yulwei, he's like, are you with me, brother? He's like, yeah, always have been, unfortunately. And then Baez asks Pharaoh to come with them on a trip. And Pharaoh's like, fuck you.
Yeah, straight away. I love that. I don't like how she doesn't even try to hide that she's been eavesdropping. She's like, I'm not coming with you. Fuck you. That's it.
Yeah, they don't even get a chance to ask. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, she doesn't try to like hide it. And then Baez, he's like, but you want vengeance, don't you? And then he plays on that. And basically it says, if you really want vengeance, you want it against Khalul. Fuck the Emperor. And in order to get to Khalul, you got to come with me because that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to take him down. And that was enough to convince Pharaoh. And she, when you're always like, all right, I'm out, stick with Baez, keep an eye on him, don't trust him, but just, hang out with him and listen to what he says. She's like, wait, where are you going? And he's like, I gotta go to Gurkul. I gotta keep an eye on, the Gurkish. She's like, no. And then he's like, twice you've tried to kill me. You keep running away from me, and now you want me to stay? You don't make any goddamn sense.
Women.
And then she's like, does Baez lie in order, like when he says that he could give her vengeance? And he's like, nope. So she's like, so I have to go with him. And he's like, I know. That's why I brought you here. And then he hugs her goodbye. And then that's pretty much the end of the chapter. That's pretty much the end of the chapter. It was near the end where Yulwei says like, follow him, obey him, but don't trust him. And then she's just there alone with the luxury and the gardens and the pinks because that's what all white people are. Apparently, they're like, we're
Yeah.
pink, right? Which is kind of true actually. If you think
Well,
about
are
it,
you
pink.
fucking pink?
We're pink.
Sorry, I'm just
Yeah.
being in the character.
Just gotcha.
Well, all you?
All of you pinks. What do you guys rate this chapter?
First of all, I really like the that line, each man worships himself here. Because I find it quite interesting that the Union doesn't actually have like an established religion. Because that's like in history anyway, it's pretty much just not a thing.
Right. I mean,
Yeah. We know now that Bias was the foundation of the Union, and we know that he hates Khalul, and Khalul has done the opposite.
yeah, Khalul went straight for the whole praising a god.
Yeah.
And so I guess Baez went the other way and went full secular with the Union.
Yeah. And you're right. It is very interesting and unique, but definitely was not. What's the term? It definitely wasn't by chance that that this happened that way.
And I suppose you could call like the whole history with, Juvens and the Magi, especially like the murals that we see of these events. So you could call that sort of like a quasi-religion. But you really get the sense that people just don't care.
They don't. They really don't.
Well, to them, it's like fucking, like 400 years ago, we'd be like, wow, those myths and stuff are crazy. They're so true. They're so real. But that's only because you grew up with religion. You grew up with this is what's true. God is real. Blah 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 blah, and all that. So whenever that's ingrained into a culture for so long that isn't the case, then a lot of those myths and stuff become much more unbelievable much earlier on.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I reckon I'm going to give this one a 6 out of 9 fingers
Okay.
because I do like Pharaoh's. We get a lot more of Pharaoh's character. We get a lot more of her opinions, especially about the Union. We get a bit of exposition from Baez and Yulway, but overall, it's not a super exciting chapter, is it?
No. No.
What
Harrison.
about you guys?
Go ahead, Jeff.
I was gonna give it a 6 as well. To be honest, not much happened. I mean, she cracked Baez in the face, and that's amazing. But
Yeah, it would have been a
yeah,
5 if she didn't.
yeah, if she it would have been a 5 if she did it. But it just went from one room to another room, so it just got more exposition from Pharaoh, more like developing her character and her motivations. Even though it does seem like it's boiled down to just vengeance, but she's very adept at like analyzing people, understanding their character or like just reading their body language. And now we know that she's colorblind. That's an interesting tidbit. Like, why is that? So
Mm.
you can't say
I
anything yet.
so I want to go last here because I wanted to point at a little bit of lore highlights this time.
Mm.
We don't get a lot of them, but when
Hmm.
they come up, it's interesting. Uthman al-Dash, the same person who Pharaoh was the slave of and had slept with at some point, whether uh,
Willingly
forced
or
to
not.
or not, yeah, willingly or
Mhm.
not, is the emperor, and it's only been an emperor for a year, and has basically brought the entire continent, which was probably mostly under his father's control, down completely into his firm grasp. So he's able to mobilize the entire continent,
Mhm.
and I just think that's interesting to think about how we don't ever get a perspective from Kanta, but I like these little subtle things showing that this isn't the last time we hear about the Emperor's strength and it being separate from the Prophet's strength, and I like those little.
Mm.
That's true. That's true.
I
I want to
also
change my answer.
Too late.
No.
no, please. Oh.
So you're gonna give this a what, Harrison?
Yeah, I'm trying to. There was one other.
Oh, one other note.
Yeah, there's one other note, and that's we get to see how Yulway and Bias kind of perceive each other, and they talk about the seed a little bit, and how this is our first mention of Zacharias. We don't know who Zacharias is. Zacharias was mentioned by Bias previously that him and Neal had been beaten by the Maker in the house of the Maker.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and but we hear that Zacharias is apparently still alive and kicking, and that
Mm-hmm.
he is also kind of somewhat in league with them because otherwise he wouldn't have mentioned his opinion. And so I like how that was brought up as well as a little seed planted, and
Mm-hmm.
that they don't like the fact that Baez is talking about using this, getting and looking for the seed, and they don't like that at all. They're like Juvens would not like this. I know we kind of mentioned that, but he's like Juvens would not be cool with this, and he's like but whatever. It's like kind
Fuck
of usually
Juvens.
brushes it off. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, bro. Fuck Juvens, man.
He doesn't
He
give a
don't know
shit.
shit. So I just wanted to point out those little lore tidbits there, and of course, like I said, I already talked about the how bias up. So for me, despite what I just said, I still am only gonna give this a 5 out of 9. I do
Oh.
like those lore tidbits, and I do really like this little bias things going on that we get to see from Yulway and from
Mhm.
Pharaoh. But they also are just kind of talking
Yeah.
and
Mm.
nothing, and it's good development, but there's not much else there. It's not development and progression that much. It's just really good development, and so
Mm-hmm.
that's why I'm gonna give it a 5 out of 9.
Okay. All right. All right. I get it. Understand. I dig
You
it.
went in a completely different direction to where I thought you were going to go with that.
Yeah, I thought he was gonna go like 7 or 8.
I thought it's the best chapter on the whole series.
He tricked us.
It's the old switcheroo.
Oh,
The old
switcheroo. Bait and
Frankenstein.
switch. All right. So we'll move on to our next segment, and normally it's question of the week, but we've been discussing some of the polls we've been doing. Here's another spoiler warning for everyone.
Spoiler.
We'll be talking
Spoilers.
spoilers. We'll be talking about favorite appearances of the Bloody Nine.
So we did a poll just like we've been doing, and we're going to continue to do. And we appreciate everybody who has contributed because it's really interesting seeing what everybody thinks, both in the poll itself and in the comments. So the poll that we did was the best or everyone's favorite Bloody Nine outings in the original trilogy. So not in Red Country, which we'll do Red Country next week, and that's when you guys will hear it then. So we did Logan and Pharaoh's chase scene and the blade itself, which will coming up on pretty soon. We did Under Alcus with the Shanka, whenever Logan loses his shit smelling him. The Battle in the High Places, where he unfortunately kills Tol Daru. Fenris the Feared and the Bloody Nine, that one's self-explanatory whenever they're fighting outside of Carleon. And the very last one, whenever Dogman and Logan take a crew down to Adua, and Logan almost loses his shit and kills Dogman. Interestingly, this poll was a lot closer. I thought the Battle in the High Places was gonna win again because everybody loves the High Places so much, apparently, which is interesting. But I mean, it makes sense. Battle in Places is amazing. But that one did third, right behind with only 2 less votes, at least on Reddit. Did the fight against the Shanka under Alcus, which is also a fantastic scene, and then. Second place was Logan and Pharaoh's first chase scene, which I think is because it's the first time we see it and it's revealed in such a great way. It's Jeff's favorite, isn't it, Jeff?
Yeah.
And then the top one was Fenris the Feared versus the Bloody Nine of the Circle. And I think it's just because the description on that one is just so artistic and flavorful. And George, you were surprised that Adua.
Yeah,
Battle of
how
Adua
did that
got
only
only
get 6 votes?
on Reddit.
Well, but in
How?
because in Adua he is literally the Bloody Nine for like 2 seconds.
I know it's only a very, very short one.
It's
But-
very short.
I think
He doesn't
because
kill anybody.
No, he doesn't. But it's interesting because it's like the first time where it kind of slips, and it's sort of recognizable that it is just Logan, and it's not like this weird superpower where he's been like I don't know. Some people think he's like being possessed by a spirit or something like that. It's not. It's just him being an asshole, and you see that for the first time. You're like, oh, so he is just an asshole. He's not just like.
Well,
You're like, damn.
if anything, it might be like DID, dissociative identity disorder.
It is a little bit of that for sure.
It could be a bit of that, but at the
Just
same
says,
time,
like-
that is still him.
No, yeah, I mean, it
Oh
is.
yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely not enough to shift responsibility away from yourself completely.
No, of course not. Of course not.
And
Mhm.
how do the other polls do, Jeff, on
So-
Twitter and Instagram?
So on the Instagrams, we have the winning Bloody Nine appearance will be the Battle in the High Places with 42%.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. Yep. And then in second place with 33% is the Shanka genocide and before their hand.
I love that you named that, bro. I should have done that one.
That's 33%. And then the third place at 17% is the chase scene and the blade itself. And then 8% for fourth and at least last on Instagram and Twitter, because you can only do 4 options, is against Fenris the Feared.
That's interesting.
Yep, that's Instagrams. And then in the Twitter, we had this was just split. 50-50 battle in the high places against Fenris the Feared.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It's interesting to see that Reddit did so much more on Fenris the Feared. Not so much more. I mean, it's a lot closer than some of the other polls we've done so far. But still. And then as for the comments, I'm not sure if you guys have looked at any of them. The top comment got more upvotes than the actual post itself on Reddit. And he basically says that the Alcus scene is super underrated. It's absolutely brutal, and for once you can really see how a man might break and become the Bloody Nine with all that Logan has lost to the Shanka, which is good. It's a good thought there.
And I
Very
do
good.
especially like when he's killed all of the Shanka, and he just sees Pharaoh, and he's like, "Ooh, another enemy."
Well, I don't think he sees Pharaoh then. He sees Pharaoh in the blade itself. But in the Shanka one, doesn't he just see like, wait, why do all these bodies have arrows? What the fuck? Who's taking my
No,
kill?
he definitely does have a scene like that where he sees Pharaoh in and underground, and she's just like, "Oh fuck,
He
I've seen
does
what
do that
happened."
too, Jeff. He does do that too. He does notice the arrows, but then he also sees Pharaoh right
He
after
does
that.
see
Yeah.
because he sees her how did he describe her before they're hanged? Like she was flitting from rock to rock while shooting arrows.
Hmm.
Yeah, okay, gotcha. And he did say like I'll get to you later, like in his own head.
Hmm.
Right. Okay.
In the
Gotcha.
first one, he says, "Cunt bitch," which is just eloquent as fuck, isn't
A true Englishman.
it?
The one of the follow up comments on that top comment was the whole he talked about how the trip to Alcus is his favorite part in the and one of his favorite parts in the whole books, and he says the main point of this is that he says he loves seeing that Pharaoh's POV is that she realized she's kind of got a soft spot for Logan. Whenever they're like walking in the dark, and
Right.
but she
She has to
doesn't
leave
have
his
any
hand.
idea how to have feelings in the first place. And that's a good point too. Both those two comments up there are really, really good points.
That's no, it is. Well, that was this seems like that was our question of the week. Wink
Oh,
wink. More of our poll of the week, but
I will say that a lot of people with the high places said that this was a big turning point for them in the story as a whole.
oh, like
A
how
lot of
they
people,
perceive Logan, right?
yes, and I
Mm.
would say it's very accurate because you kind of push it off. You're like, oh, the like you said, George, the Bloody Nine, it's like a superpower. But a lot of people here said, you see him kill Tolder, you see him kill the kid, you see him not take responsibility, you see him, shrug it off. Everybody kind of hates him for it. That's where we get to see, why he is the way he is, or why people see him the way he is.
Yeah. That's very true.
Well put, Harrison. Very well put.
Good job. Good job. That's our show, everyone. We want to thank you for listening and supporting this podcast. As you all know, this is a passion project for the three of us, and your support does mean a lot to us.
Join us next week as we cover old friends and Back to the Mud.
And make sure you answer our poll later in the week. Make sure you check up on our AI art on Instagram and Twitter. And have a great week, guys.
And if you haven't already, please subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or any podcast app that you use to listen to podcasts on. And please rate and review this podcast as it helps to spread our reach. Thank you all again for listening.
I did not tell you to trust him.